Hey everybody, Chad here again. So all detractors to the Book of Mormon will say the same thing. It can't be true because blank. Well, the blank is filled with something that the person feels is inconsistent with a true book. Therefore, it must be a false book and not a true book. Well, this is false logic, and I'm going to show you why. To do that, let's take a look at the OJ Simpson trial. In his closing argument, OJ's lawyer, Johnny Cochran, used the famous phrase, "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit," referencing how when OJ tried on the gloves that were allegedly used in the murders, they appeared to be too small. His statement indicated that since the gloves didn't fit OJ, he could not have been the killer. Although the phrase was catchy, it was inherently false. Jurors were still able to convict OJ, even if the glove didn't appear to fit him that day in the courtroom. There are several potential reasons for the gloves to not appear to fit. Maybe they got wet and shrunk since they were used. Maybe OJ had his fingers spread out. Maybe someone in the evidence chain switched them, or maybe they were even planted to look like they were used in the murder. The point is that even if the gloves didn't actually fit, or even if they were planted by a corrupt cop, the jurors still could have convicted OJ, and, considering all the other evidence pointing to OJ's guilt, a conviction would have been entirely reasonable even with ill-fitting gloves. Well, the reason OJ was acquitted was not the gloves. The reason was that the jurors didn't want to convict him. Let me explain. OJ's lawyers did a masterful job of changing the focus of the jurors off of the brutal murder of two people and onto the biases and competency of the Los Angeles Police Department. Once the jurors felt that an acquittal would send a message that they were passionate about, the gloves became the excuse they needed to feel at peace with ignoring all of the remaining evidence pointing to OJ's guilt. In the same way, just because a specific piece of evidence may appear to be inconsistent with a true book of ancient scripture that originated with God, it does not necessarily negate or nullify all other evidence which supports such a book. When judging the truthfulness of the Book of Mormon, it is just as necessary to consider the totality of the evidence as it is to do so when determining the guilt or innocence of a murder suspect. And just as there are many potential reasons why a glove may not fit, there are also many potential reasons why a particular argument against the Book of Mormon may appear to be legitimate. I will admit I probably have not heard every argument against the truth of the Book of Mormon, but one thing that I have noticed that seems pretty consistent is that of its detractors, nearly all of them have never actually read the entire book. Please, take the time to read it thoughtfully all the way through. Then do it again. You have to understand that to criticize without putting in the work required to get any true comprehension of what's really in it is just plain lazy. It makes it seem like you don't really want to know for yourself if it's true or not. Now, merely saying what other people have said in a court of law is called hearsay, and hearsay should be just as inadmissible in an argument against the Book of Mormon. If you want to repeat the accusations that Joseph Smith was a felon or a philanderer as your excuse for not reading the book, you should read it anyway. Can you imagine a scientist disagreeing with someone else's work without even reading what the study says? If the book is true, then maybe your opinion of Joseph Smith is less than accurate. Didn't Christ say that by their fruits ye shall know them? Anybody can say anything about anyone. The Book of Mormon is Joseph's fruit. Why base your opinions on rumors or third-party accusations and opinions of others who were born 100 years after Joseph Smith died? You have his greatest testament right there in the Book of Mormon. Please just read it and see for yourself. But I caution you, just like with science, if you are unable to set aside your biases against the Book of Mormon before you do the experiment of reading it, your results will be just as flawed as any biased scientific study, or any jury that is willing to toss a mountain of evidence all because of a glove that doesn't appear to fit. Remember, prior biases lead to biased conclusions. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're someone who was raised in a household where all that is ever said about Mormons is that they are a delusional cult and that Joseph Smith was a nut job. If you see a video that claims that it has proof that Joseph Smith made up the Book of Mormon himself, your first thought will probably be, "Ha, I knew it." And you might then watch the video all the while nodding your head and accepting everything at face value. The chances are nearly zero that you will pause and wonder exactly where the information came from. You certainly won't wonder if there's any other information that contradicts what you just heard because, remember, you knew it. And this just proves it. I mean, the glove obviously didn't fit, so he can't be guilty, right? How about a real example? In the beginning of the Book of Mormon, a prophet named Lehi and his family left Jerusalem and traveled south along the west side of the Red Sea until they turned due east, then traveled across what is now Saudi Arabia, and finally came to a tropical area near the ocean. There the family found so much fruit, honey, fresh water, and lush trees that they called the place Bountiful. At the time the Book of Mormon was published in 1829, critics pointed to the fact that everybody knew there was no such tropical oasis on the southwestern coast of the Saudi Peninsula. In fact, this non-existent land of Bountiful was used to discredit the Book of Mormon as an obvious work of fiction for over 100 years. Except all Joseph's critics turned out to be dead wrong. In recent decades, a few small areas on the coast of what today is the country of Oman have been discovered that are lush and tropical. One of these places is in the exact spot the Book of Mormon says it should be, and is an exact match of everything contained in its description of Bountiful in the Book of Mormon. Needless to say, this poorly fitting glove that so many critics used for decades to prove the Book of Mormon false was simply unknown at the time. So clearly, when detractors say they have proof the Book of Mormon is false, what they should be saying is, here's something we're not sure about yet. Does anybody know anything about this? Quite often, unfortunately, evidence that seems to detract from the Book of Mormon is not carefully researched and is proclaimed loudly as proof against the Book of Mormon until it is found to not be proof against it, at which point it is quietly swept aside and forgotten about so the detractors can move on to their next proof. Let me wrap this up with something for all of the detractors, all those of you who are on the fence, and hopefully those of you with an open and honest mind and a willingness to search for truth, whatever that may look like. My father was an FBI agent, and he told me on a couple of occasions, "Son, all it takes is one or two believable witnesses to convict a murderer and permanently take away his liberty or even his life. In the front of the Book of Mormon, there is a statement from 3 men who swear that they saw not only the gold plates from which the Book of Mormon was translated, but that the plates were shown to them by an angel sent from God, who descended from heaven to speak to them and to show them the plates. They also testified that the voice of God spoke to them and commanded them to testify of the truth of the Book of Mormon and of Joseph Smith's calling as a prophet to translate the plates." After the testimony of these 3 men, there is an additional statement from 8 more men who Joseph showed the plates to. These men swear in their statement that they held and physically inspected the gold plates, and that by their observation, the plates were exactly as Joseph had told everyone. Now, critics have noted that all 11 witnesses were either related to or were close acquaintances of Joseph Smith. Most critics will stop there, leading those unfamiliar with the rest of the story to assume that it's likely that all of them were in on the hoax together. What you won't hear from the Book of Mormon critics is this: of the 11 men who swore an oath that they saw the plates, some of whom held them, and 3 of whom saw an angel and even heard the voice of God, every single one of these men who were relentlessly hounded by critics for the rest of their lives testified until the day they died that what they saw was 100% true. And if that's not enough, try this out. 6 of the 11 witnesses became, for one reason or another, personally disaffected with Joseph Smith and wanted nothing to do with him or with the church he founded. Let me ask you a question. What would you do if you had conspired with Joseph to deceive the people of the church he had founded by putting your name behind a fictitious statement testifying of a heavenly manifestation, and then became so disaffected with Joseph that he excommunicated you from the church? Would you feel at all inclined to maintain the lie you and he had told to the church you have just been thrown out of? How about after Joseph died? Would you still keep up the lie? Yet even after being thrown out of the church and being cut off and offended by Joseph, none of them denied their witness of the Book of Mormon, of the angel, or of the gold plates. Just ask yourself this question: what are the chances that any one of them would keep a horrible secret about a man they no longer even liked regarding a conspiracy that would hurt him and the church they had just been thrown out of? 1 in 50? 1 in 1,000? Now, take that number and multiply it by itself again and again and again and again and again. The chances that all of them would maintain their secret in the face of unrelenting pressure for the rest of their lives, even after Joseph's death, would be 0. Unless, of course, it happened exactly as they said it did. So the next time you hear someone say, the Book of Mormon can't be true because fill in the blank, just remember, yes it can, and yes it is. It only takes 1 or 2 to convict. The Book of Mormon has 11, plus millions more who have decided to actually read it with an open mind and a prayerful heart. Don't be distracted by a glove. Thanks for tuning in.